Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, December 13th, and our friend Larry Johnson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
Thank you. Friday the 13th, but we're not feeling unlucky. We're lucky to be chatting.
Yeah, exactly. Larry, let's get started with what's going on right now in the Middle East. Do you understand what Anthony Blinken is doing right now in Iraq?
Um, they're trying to figure out how to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and only it's Humpty Dumpty's been pulverized into dust. Um, this, I've been talking with Alistair Crook about this because I think he's really the best expert on what's going on in that whole area. Having given his years of experience, he knows the principal players. Um, Clearly, Russia and Iran knew that Assad was in trouble. They knew that the West, in concert with Turkey, was cooking up this offensive. Both Russia and Russia and Iran tried to convince Assad to take more military aid, to accept financial assistance. But what happened over the course of the last couple of months is that Assad was brought back into the Arab League. He'd been exiled. So all of a sudden you get invited back into the club. And at the same time, word then was leaking out that the United States was offering Syria a deal. Hey, cut those ties with Iran. You get to travel to New York City again. Oh, who wouldn't want to do that? If you've been to New York City and you see all the homeless sleeping in the streets, you'd say, oh, you hate me so much? Why do you want me to go to that shithole? So, in the course of this, the West, the United States intelligence, British intelligence, were working in close contact with the Turks, supplying weapons, supplying training, supplying trainers from Ukraine, brought those down. And here you get Turkey with its long-standing ambitions, trying to recreate the glory of the Ottoman Empire. That's sort of what Erdogan wants to do. And it's still lingering resentment over the fact that they lost Aleppo, Idlib, in the aftermath of World War I more than 100 years ago. And so all of this was coming to a point, and Russia had a choice. Russia could have intervened and fought and forced, if you will, the Syrians to stand up. But I think Russia and Putin correctly understood that this was another element of Western strategy, if you want to call it that, to weaken Russia, to get them to bleed them out, to see if they could do to them in Syria what happened to the Soviets in Afghanistan 40 years ago. And so Putin, the other thing I don't think folks appreciate is Putin had access to some intelligence, I believe, via China, because China has, and I just learned this last week, China has basically broken in through the back door of all of the U.S. telecommunications networks. And those networks are used by the CIA, used by the military for classified communications. And on their smartphones, for example, they'll have apps. It's like, people have WhatsApp, or they'll have Signal or Telegram. Those are ostensibly secure, but they're not really. But the intelligence and military communities actually created apps specifically designed to prevent anybody else from listening in. Well, they left the back door open. Chinese got into the back door. Now, some say, well, this is just U.S. disinformation to create animus towards China. Now, the fact that they're trying to keep it quiet The fact that it's not getting trumpeted on the nightly news like, the Daniel Penny case or, that makes me think it's true. And so that means the Chinese, at a minimum, they had some knowledge of what U.S. plans were too, and they passed that along to the Russians. Anyway, the Russians sit there and calculate and say, look, the fighters that are going in with ISIS or this Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they're not Turks, they're not Syrians, they're Uyghurs, Dagestanis, Uzbekis. These are militants from other countries. So they're not going to be in a position to really know how to interact with the Syrian population for starters. And Turkey was not in a position to, mobilize its army and go in. So I think Russia correctly calculated, as did Iran. Let's step back, because these people now, they own it. They've invaded it. They've broken it. They've destroyed the government. Now they have to, how are you going to feed these people? If you don't feed them, if you don't make sure that supplies are coming back in, that medical care is being provided, those people are going to leave. They're not going to flood back into Syria and go, oh, Assad's gone. They're doing just the opposite. They're getting the hell out. And they go to whatever is closest to them. Those that live near Iraq, they're going into Iraq. Those by Jordan, into Jordan. Lebanon, and Turkey. And the last thing Turkey wants is to have more refugees, but that's what it has. And now Turkey's also getting bogged down. It's in a fight with the Kurds. And they're battling the Kurds. The Kurds are backed by the United States. The United States is trying to figure out, do we fight the Turks? Do we stay with the Kurds? Well, so it's created a mess for the West. And Blinken, I think they're trying to figure out what the hell did we do? They've now blown it up. I think there was some early criticism directed at Putin and the Russians, they got, and that's how the U.S. presented it. Oh, we drove them out, Joe Biden. We drove them out. Putin's weak. No, Putin's not stupid. They recognized that this was a shit sandwich, and he wanted no part of it, not on his diet, not part of his culinary taste, to put it bluntly. And I think the Russians are quite willing to step back. Notice they've still got their air base, and they still got their naval base, and they know that Tahrir al-Sham is in no position to push them out. And, Russia's been saying, hey, we don't have a beef with you per se, and we'll work with you. Russia's very pragmatic and saying, okay, what is our national interest and what do we need to do? I think the real damage in all of this is the relationship with Turkey. Russia is not in a position where it can go confrontational with Turkey, at least not yet. But Erdogan, the guy is an egomaniac, a narcissist of extraordinary proportions. He turned around, the other day and said, there are only two rulers in the world, me and Vladimir Putin. Really, dude? It's crazy talk like that. But, now that Turkey's going to have to worry about, you can't control the ISIS fighters. Those ISIS fighters are going to have supporters in Turkey who believe that Erdogan is not doing enough to uphold Islamic practice and rules. So he could have a potential terrorist problem inside Turkey apart from the terrorist threat posed by the Kurds. The Kurds are another issue, and the Kurds aren't giving up. So, Turkey's going to be in turmoil. Israel has spread its lines of communication. Yeah, it's got buffer zones in Syria. Still got to deploy troops up there. Still got to put people there, and they're going to be vulnerable to attack. And, Lebanon's going to be in chaos. Jordan's going to be in chaos. I think the only one that's probably, in maybe not dire straits is Iraq. And at least one, I think Bashar al-Assad's brother, leading a tank unit, I think it was a battalion, may have been a brigade, took refuge in Iraq. So they've got an element of Syria's army that actually might be willing to come back and fight at some point. So what you're looking at is a recipe for chaos. So that's a long answer to what's Anthony Blinken doing now in the Middle East. He's going, oh my God, what have we done? How do we put this together? This really is 340 level chess.
Larry, there is a war going on between the United States and Turkey, considering Kurds in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, what would be the outcome of this conflict between? There is no Kurds without the United States against Turkey. What would be the outcome, in your opinion? Are they going to, behind the scene, go after some sort of agreement and put an end to just maybe hand it over to Turkey, the situation and the future of the Kurds?
No, I think the United States ultimately is going to abandon the Kurds. We got your back. That lasts until it's no longer convenient for us. The Turkey's concern with the Kurds. So the Kurds have had the terrorist arm PKK, and it was headed by a guy named Öcalan. And I know I worked specifically on when I was with another consulting firm back in the mid 1990s, that we were hired by the government of Turkey to prepare a paper on foreign support for the PKK, and particularly Greek support. The Greeks have been, they've been pumping money and resources into the Kurdish Workers' Party at least, 30 years ago, quite active. So, that has been something that the Turks are concerned about, and they want to destroy it. And you've got the Kurds who want to be independent. But the problem is, the Kurds spill over into Iraq, they spill over into Iran, they spill over into Turkey. They're really people without a country, and nobody wants them. And the only thing they have in their favor is they control that oil out there. And Turkey wants to get control of it if they can. Now, it really creates, again, some interesting conflicts, because you correctly note Turkey and the United States are NATO allies, but this puts them at odds. Israel, on the intelligence side, is in bed with the Turks, or the Turks are in bed with the Izis. Well, the Israelis also got good ties with the Kurds, because a lot of that oil that's coming out of there is going to Israel. So it puts Israel in the position of who are they going to side with? Or are they going to try to avoid taking a side? So that's the launch of this HTS offensive that has removed Assad from government and forced the fall of the Syrian government. It was not accompanied by a strategic plan to pacify, organize Syria, and to settle the various ethnic disputes. You got the Druze down south. They're making noise that, hey, they want to become part of Israel. Then you've got the Shia population, which I think is like 25%. And within that Shia population, I put the Alawites. So 70% Sunni, Druze, Shia, Alawites, and Kurds. There's no unifying principle. There's no concept of we're Syrians. We're going to, be patriots. And so this is going to devolve into chaos. I think it's going to look a lot more like Libya, but more violent than what's been going on in Libya.
When you look at the mainstream media, Larry, it seems that they're so happy because the situation in their mind, in their type of mindset, is in favor of the United States and Israel.
Mm-hmm.
The question is that if the situation is in favor of Israel, if these people are supported by the United States and Israel and they're doing everything in their favor, why why has Israel needed to bomb Syria the way that they did and they're doing right now?
Well,
And
yeah, I mean, the real simple answer on that, they didn't want any of the Syrian army's military gear to fall into the hands of ISIS. And let's be clear, HTS is ISIS. You know, when you're going to, when you go back and look at the Bureau of Counterterrorism's, the publication Country Reports on Terrorism, for the last 7 years, Hayat al-Sham has been like number 8 or 9 top 10 terrorist groups in the world. ISIS, different variants of ISIS occupy the first 5 groups. And so the split between, ISIS and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, could have been for, something like, well, you need to pray for 5 minutes. No, we're only going to pray for 3 minutes. They'll have that kind of fight. Something that an outsider would view that's stupid. But, ideologically, in terms of their beliefs about Islam, they come out of this, we call it the Wahhabi Salafist faction that brokers no compromise with anybody, and even they put themselves in the position of judging other Muslims as bad Muslims that have to be killed or eliminated. So
it seems to me, yeah, go ahead.
So I was just going to say that's why Israel had to destroy all that equipment. They don't, at least Israel's not completely stupid. They knew that they couldn't leave that equipment laying around, or else the bad guys would get a hold of it and be using it against Israel.
You know what's so amazing to me, that they're talking about that Bashar al-Assad was trying to be closer to the Arab states,
Yeah.
get a better relationship with the United States. And on the other hand, you see they're just removing Bashar al-Assad from Syria and putting these people in charge in Syria. Nobody knows. The United States is afraid of them. Israel is afraid of them. In Iraq, Iranians are preparing, if they want to attack Iraq, they're going to be on the ground fighting these people. And they're making a huge problem in that region. And nobody knows what would be the future for any of these countries in that region.
Yeah, no, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be war. Look, I think one of the other dangers that comes out of this is that I think that there are several leaders in Israel and the United States that have concluded that Iran is very weak, has been weakened by this, and that now's the time to strike, that they're going to attack Iran to try to take out Iran's nuclear technology and research. All of this is predicated on the belief, and this is where, we all operate according to certain assumptions. And Israel is operating on the assumption that during their last attack, that they devastated Iran's air defense systems. And so since it's devastated, man, they can go in anytime, anywhere, and do anything, just like what they're doing in Syria. They can bomb and bomb and bomb and destroy Iran. I don't know if Israeli military intelligence confirms that, because it's a lie. It didn't happen. I trust Alistair Crook's, his contacts and assessments that Iran's air defense systems are intact and, in fact, thwarted a massive Israeli attack back on October 1st. So if Israel and the United States continue down this belief, oh, Iran's weakened, and they launch an attack, that is going to lead to a very, very dramatic escalation. Because up to this point, even though Iran has repeatedly said that it's going to retaliate for the October 1st attacks, it's held off. You got to step back and say, why? Why have they held off? I think part of the reason is that Russia has been counseling restraint, saying, look, you get to be the victim in this, not the aggressor. And you're going to build a lot more goodwill among the global south and among the other BRICS countries if you take the high road and hold off for now. And I think calculating that at some point Israel will strike again at Iran. And then when they do, when they strike for the second time, then Iran will take the gloves off. And I think will really pummel Israel in a way that Israel never has suffered before. Which then, turns with Israel coming to the United States, help us, help us. And, things then can start spinning out of control because Iran's got a defense agreement, a joint, let's call it a joint defense pact with Russia. I don't know when it was signed, but, they'd certainly negotiated and it was ready for signature.
It seems that, as the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, said, by January 25th, they're going to sign it in Russia.
Okay.
In Moscow.
So it hasn't been signed yet. But the outlines are there, and the collaboration between the two militaries has been there for the last 5 years, as well as Iran's been working with China. See, this is the thing. I keep hearing these, boy, Iran's weakened. It's really in a weak situation. Going, so they're signing a military agreement with Russia. They've got a good economic and military relationship with China. They're now part of BRICS. They've reestablished diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. So the fact that, and then they go, oh, but this now has cut off the resupply lines to Hezbollah. Haven't these people studied anything about the history of the Levant, the smuggling routes through the deserts? I mean, this has only been going on for centuries, for more than 2,000 years. And now all of a sudden they've got it under control. The United States and Israel don't have enough soldiers to patrol the frontiers to keep it under control. Hezbollah will continue to get weapons and ammunition. Again, it's just the foolishness. Oh, yeah, we've cut them off. It reminds me of back in 2008, 2009, when every month we were being told, yeah, we killed the number 2 guy in Al Qaeda. They kept killing the number 2 guy. Said, I don't want to be number 2. I want to be number 1. But it comes back to this whack-a-mole strategy. It's not a strategic vision where you figure out, here's the end point, here's where we are, how do we get from here to there? No, it's just like, well, let's just drive and see where we go. Like bumper cars, boom, crash, go this way. It really is. It's absurd. And it would be funny were it not for the human cost, the lives that are being lost. And, the videos are popping up. These HTS, ISIS folks they're gunning down unarmed people. They're hanging. They're committing all sorts of atrocities. And what does that do? Well, that enrages the people whose families have been so abused, so that they seek revenge. So you get this cycle of violence that's going to escalate, not diminish.
Larry, here is the map for those people who are arguing right now with the attacks with the Israeli attacks on Syria, they have destroyed everything in Syria. Right now, they can use the Syrian airspace, then go to Iraq, then Iran,
Mm-hmm.
reach to Iran. But the question is, Larry, last time that they have attacked Iran, we haven't seen anything from Syria resisting, just not letting them passing their airspace. And what was the importance of the Syrian army? Have they done anything in terms of avoiding Israel to use their airspace or shooting any sort of Israeli fighter jets?
No, no. I think the only the area in Syria where you had the most active, effective air defense was around the Russian base, the Russian air base. But the rest of Syria, if they had an effective air defense, the Iranian embassy / consulate wouldn't have been attacked. In April, was it? So what we're seeing is that Israel's just making sure by destroying what's left, the remnants of the Assyrian army infrastructure, that it will have free reign. It doesn't care about international law. It's lawless.
And the other thing would be, Larry, in terms of the relationship between Iran and Hezbollah, it seems to me as this war and this conflict goes by, they're going to find some sort of way to produce weapons in Lebanon. They're going to be more independent in the future. And is that going to be the path toward the future for Iran and Hezbollah?
Well, they've already done that in the past. I mean, they produced some of their own rockets and missiles. Now, they haven't been terribly sophisticated or terribly effective. I've always been struck that Israel complains about all the rockets being launched into Israel from Hezbollah's territory, yet very, very, very few Israelis are ever killed or wounded in those attacks. It burns up an occasional car. Okay, so that helps the local car dealers who are going to sell more brand new automobiles to people whose car was burned out. Bad news for the insurance agencies. So it's just what we are seeing, though, is that the ceasefire so far is holding. And Israel did not seek a ceasefire because it was winning. We got those Hezbollah guys on the run. No, they didn't. It was just the opposite. Israel was getting bled out and needed to regroup. They'd much rather fly planes and drop bombs because, you don't have to clean up the mess on the ground after that. Troops on the ground, though, that's where you fully exercise control.
Larry, if Bashar al-Assad was that dangerous guy that they're talking about, that he did so much, he inflicts so much suffering on Syrian people, here is what CNN reported. The problem is right now with the reporting coming from CNN, if there were evidence in Syria, what do they need to fake it? Here is one of them.
In a windowless cell, he can finally see the sky.
انت حر الله ضوء انت حر الله ضوء روح روح يا الله حد اعصابك
My God, the light, he says. Oh God, there is light. My God, there is light.
ولا طيران الحمد لله روح
Okay.
خليكم معي
Stay with me, stay with me, he repeats again and again.
الحمد لله خليكم معي خليكم معي إلى 3 شهور
For 3 months, I didn't know anything about my family. He says. I didn't hear anything about my children.
حيشوفوك هلا حيشوفوك على التلفزيون ما بعرف شي عن أولادي والله ما بعرف شي عن أهلي.
Larry, he says for 3 months he was in a cell, in a windowless cell. Here is his fingernails. So, and
he's got. If you were in that kind of cell with no access to light, he'd be whiter than me. Okay? The whiter shade of pale. So, yeah, that was wonderfully stage managed. Notice that the female reporter didn't have her head covered. And touching, so what, he was supposedly one of these Islamic militants that Assad had liked up. The ones who take their Islamic religion seriously. I'm friends with one woman in Lebanon, and with women here in the States, you'll hug and kiss on a cheek. There's no touching with her. It's hello and you hand over your heart. So here's this guy. Hey, I get to feel up the blonde. Hey, how about a massage, baby? That it's just so. Yeah, they're stage managing this to the best of their ability to create a narrative, and that was, I think we talked about that on Monday. That when you see this, when that CNN reporter who was wearing the headscarf was interviewing Jelani, that was set up by. I'm convinced it was set up by CIA. That was part of a propaganda operation right there, because you want to present Jelani as, hey, there's the future of Syria. Now, you've not really heard much from him of late, and HTS is now faced with this situation. It's one thing to try to govern up in Aleppo or even Idlib, but now Damascus and other places throughout Syria, they don't have the manpower for that yet. And the wonderful thing about these religious fanatics, and I'm saying this ironically, they are the most fractious group of people. And so, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're talking Islamic extremists, Christian extremists, or Jewish extremists. They're fractional. They can't get along. They're always going to fight amongst each other. They don't have this concept of the sacrificing for the greater good. They are the greater good. You got to do it my way or else. So that kind of mentality, Jelani, you can put him on CNN as many times as you want to talk in, mellow tones. But, they're still going to string up the unbelievers.
Larry, do you think that in the United States and Israel, they were shocked by the outcome of the conflict in Syria, or they knew what's coming next?
Oh, no. They're like, you ever seen a dog chase a car? Have you ever seen a dog catch a car that is chasing? This was the case, I think the United States and Israel calculated that this would go on for, I think they're really calculating that this would be more extended, that it would get the Russians bogged down in a counterinsurgency campaign, that it would start bleeding Russia out. If nothing, I think, and understand, there was not like one objective. The United States had its objectives. The Brits had their objectives. The Turks had their objectives. The Israelis had their objectives. So you always find a way where your plan could fit with that plan. And so from the United States standpoint, yeah, we'll back the Turkish play here. Go in, push HTS and see if you can force Assad to fall. Because from our standpoint, it's going to force the Russians to fight. And if they're fighting, they're going to have to shift some manpower resources from Ukraine. They have to bring them down here. They'll have to shift aircraft. So this will take maybe some of the heat off of the Ukrainians. I really believe that was an element of the calculation. Whoops. And that's where I think Russia understood that was the plan. And so how do you, in a perfect, like a judo move, if someone's pushing at you, then you let their momentum come with you and you toss them. I think that's exactly what Putin did now. He said, okay, You guys want it? Boom, here it is. Come on, Assad, come up here, hide out in Moscow, learn to ice skate, whatever. Open up an eye clinic. You are an ophthalmologist. But now, the United States and Turkey are trying to figure out what the hell do we do with this? Here's the United States. Yes, meet the new head of Syria. Yeah, we got a $10 million reward on his head. Well, you going to take that off? Okay, he's no longer a terrorist. It really creates the hypocrisy element of it is just stunning. And you saw that this week at the State Department press conference with Count Chocula. Matt Miller, he looks like a vampire from one of these movies. And he comes out and says, oh, yeah, we think it's a good idea if the ICC indicts Assad. And the reporters go, what? You mean the ICC you were telling us about last week that needed to be destroyed and invaded by the U.S. military because they wanted to arrest Netanyahu and Gallant? That ICC? Well, yeah. And they asked, well, what about the $10 million reward? If somebody turns in Jelani, do they get paid? I'll get back to you on that. I haven't thought any of this through. I mean, like I said, if the human cost wasn't so great, it would be hilarious. Just the incompetence on display.
I think that the situation, Larry, in Syria was getting to the point that it was so difficult for Iran and Russia to handle the situation, the way that the United States together with Turkey and Israel were pushing these people toward Assad. And the situation in Syria was not that good in terms of their economy, their army. And right now, do you think by this move on the part of Iran and Russia, how is it going to... Iran and Russia are not in that region. They don't have any common border with Syria.
Right.
But Israel has.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey has. We have a chaos between the United States and Turkey. We have this group coming from China, from Russia, as you mentioned, which is so important, I think, for the future. As we know, these terrorist attacks in Russia were done by these people, by the people coming from Central Asia, from China, Uyghurs and Dagestanis, as you mentioned, from Russia. And this is a huge problem for the future for these countries as well. Do you think they're going to keep it under their control, or we're going to have a new terrorist attack in China, or maybe in Russia, in Iran? We had in Iran and Russia during this year and last year.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a threat that Russia and Iran have always had to deal with, in part because that's one of the tactics that the West has pursued. The West has been funding and training and arming and equipping terrorists for the express purpose of attacking civilians, not attacking military targets. I mean, this is the definition of terrorism. I keep repeating it, but I repeat it so people take it to heart. Violence against civilians for political purposes. Real simple. If it's one thing if you putting out a landmine to blow up a convoy of military vehicles. That's war. That's not terrorism. Now, the soldiers being attacked may want to be terrorized, but that's war. They're legitimate targets. Civilians are not legitimate targets. But, Iran and Russia both tried to help Assad, and Assad refused to follow their advice. You saw a sign of that at the BRICS summit. Assad stayed away. He was invited. He didn't go. He didn't want to deal with Erdogan. And there are signs that perhaps even some of this could have been negotiated away with Erdogan, but Assad wasn't going to have any of it. So, if you've ever had a friend or a member of your family that's been addicted to illegal narcotics or to alcohol, and that they are a constant drunk. Yeah, you want to help them, but they're the one ultimately making the choice to drink and to ingest the drugs. And if they refuse to stop it, if they refuse to help, you step away. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, but sometimes you step away and say, okay, they're going to have to find out, they're going to have to hit bottom. They're going to have to suffer. And in that suffering, maybe they'll come to their senses. Now, I don't think even Russia or Iran anticipated that the situation in Syria would fall apart so quickly. But they did, I think, correctly judge, we don't want to get bogged down here having to fight this where we're bleeding resources. Because, Russia doesn't have to worry just about what's going on in Syria. The West is trying to mount a Maidan-style coup in Georgia. They've overturned the elections in Romania. They're really working on Armenia, trying to get Pashinyan to come to the U.S. side, because they see that as a way to, again, weaken Russia. They want to attack Russia from the south. That's been the goal. There is that sort of strategic vision. Destroying Russia. Why? Because we don't like the Russian religious practices? Oh, because they're communists? No. We want their damn resources. We want their uranium. We want their gold. We want their oil. We want their natural gas. We want that for us, not for them. That's the Western attitude. And then so everything is driven by the financial interests behind that. And Russia, particularly on Putin, has stood as a big obstacle to that campaign of raping and pillaging.
If you were to pick one of these 2 points as the main point for the conflict in Syria, what would that be? It would be the conflict in Ukraine to just humiliate Russia in Syria, or maybe in their mind they want to defeat Russia in Syria, or if Russia have decided to go in Syria and defending Bashar al-Assad, the Russian army would be overstretched and they can do some sort of damage to the Russian army. Or it was all about Israel and their goal and their objectives.
Yes. It's both. I mean, it's not either or. Again, it depends. Recognize that you've got at least 4 main players on the, let's call it the antagonist side of the house. You got Turkey, you got Israel, then you got the Brits, then you got those 3 with Turkey, Brits, U.S., and then Israel. Each one had different objectives and strategic goals. And that's why I say for the United States, they saw it as a twofer. If we can, getting rid of Assad may eliminate a threat to Israel, but we also see it as a way to bleed the Russians dry. It's the Afghan strategy that the United States employed against the Soviets in the 1980s. And, the Soviets, ultimately saw that as they couldn't continue to expend the resources, and they pulled out. There's some who argue that was a deciding factor in the ultimate collapse of the Soviet Union. But, it's both. And that's where Russia looked and said, we're not going to get into this trap. This is not our fight. We came in to help Syria defend itself, and Syria did that effectively, 6-7 years ago. And things then were in a stalemate, they had halted. But now Russia said, no, we're not going to continue to put ourselves in this kind of risk.
Does BRICS need an army, Larry? Or are they gonna going toward that direction? Right now, there is some sort of military relationship between Iran, Russia, and China. But how about BRICS having an army to protect its interest and the countries involved within BRICS?
Yeah, no, I think a BRICS military would be a disaster. That's the last thing they need, because that makes them like the West, where everything is a problem to be solved militarily. BRICS has said, hey, we're a collaboration of nations, of equals. We're going to work together. We're not going to work against each other. We're not going to go out and impose our will militarily. Yeah, no, I don't see that as a possibility.
How about the future of the cooperation between Iran, Russia, and China? Is the nature of this cooperation going to be more solid, more improving? Is it going to improve, or Donald Trump would be able to put some sort of obstacles in the way that they're heading for?
Yeah, this is Donald Trump's is in for an education. There are people who are, been very strong critics even of Biden's policies, who genuinely believe that Russia and China at heart are enemies. They don't like each other. They don't get along. So that all we had in the United States have to do, this goes back to Kissinger, man, we just got to peel off Russia so we can roll. Because as much as we want to destroy Russia, the big kahuna, the big target, the Moby Dick of international politics in the West is Captain Ahab, is China. China's Moby Dick. And by God, we're going to get them. And so part of that getting them is to peel off Russia. So yeah, it's a very cynical policy. They'll use or try to entice and bamboozle Iran or Russia, because look, the intents of my country, of the United States, towards the rest of the world are not good. I keep referring to us as we're like an active pedophile in a neighborhood of children. We have to be stopped. We're not self-regulating, at least up to this point. We feel compelled to meddle in the affairs of every other country. Sanction Cuba, sanction Venezuela, sanction China, sanction Russia. We're going to sanction everybody we can to threaten them, to try. We sanctioned. I've said all along that we don't really have a historical record of sanctions working, but it appears that Syria would be an exception to that. Just the level of suffering inflicted on the Syrian people. But to what end? It didn't bring peace or stability. So this, instead of, driving them apart, I think all the Iranians, the Russians, and the Chinese, particularly the last 3 years in terms of NATO contact towards Russia, have been eye-opening. They're like, these really are evil, bad people. We thought we could talk to them, but they're not trustworthy. They don't keep their word. They tell you one thing and do the exact opposite. The narrative that the West continues to try to push, that we got to stop Russia and China because they're trying to rebuild their empires. It's like, wait a damn minute. They don't have massive military bases scattered around the world. They've not spent the last 30 years militarily intervening in Iraq multiple times, in Syria, in Libya, in Somalia, in Serbia, and, go down the list. They're not the problem. We in the West, the United States, we're the problem. And I would hope that Donald Trump would come in willing to acknowledge that, but he doesn't, because, we're America, we're the best. We got the strongest military, all this nonsense. No humility whatsoever. And, I think Trump's going to be in for an education because, there comes a time when, you see it in these, it's a theme in Hollywood movies. The guy gets thrown into prison and initially he's he's raped or he's, punished. We saw that in the movie Shawshank Redemption. But all of a sudden the guy, he develops and gets friends and becomes strong. And then those who bullied him and took advantage of him are suddenly forced to back down. And, that's what I think has taken place with Russia, China, and Iran. The depth of the relationship between those countries is not superficial. And it's not transactional. It's organic. And they recognize, you know what? We either hang together or we'll hang separately.
Yeah. Larry, Donald Trump, in his recent interview with the Time magazine for the Person of the Year, and he was asked if he would trust Netanyahu, and he said, I don't trust anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question, which was important, he was asked is if he's going to attack Iran. He said, anything can happen. It's a very volatile situation. 2. And the third question, which was important, he was asked about the West Bank, if he's going to support the annexation of the West Bank. And he didn't answer the question. He said he is interested in two-state solution, and there are many ways to do that. Putting all of these pictures together, do you understand what would be his policy in the Middle East?
No, I don't. I don't think he understands what his policy will be. Part of his perception right now are based on assumptions. And as we talked about it earlier, if you've got the wrong assumption, it's like, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to run up $1 million in credit card debt because my friend Nima here, I know that he's a billionaire and he'll lend me some money. Now I'm making a big assumption there. And then when I get in that situation, hey, I need the money. And you go, billionaire? What are you, crazy? I'm not a billionaire. I don't have that money. All of a sudden, those assumptions change. So they assume that Iran's weak. Well, what happens if Iran's strong? We already have evidence, at least it's coming out of Ukraine, that the intelligence community is, I don't want to say they're lying to Trump. They're not telling Trump the reality of what's going on the ground. Let's put it that way. Which leads me to believe that they're doing a similar thing with respect to the Middle East. That they're not really giving a good picture. Now, I do find it encouraging that Trump, instead of saying, yeah, no, listen, I'm fully on board with Bezalel Smotrich's desire to start consolidating control over the West Bank. Trump didn't sign up for that. And Trump knows that Netanyahu is a snake. Netanyahu is like a slightly younger version of Erdogan. Just as crooked, just as deceitful. And Trump hasn't forgotten when Biden stole the election from Trump in 2020, the first guy out the door to say, "Joe, way to go, buddy! This is great," was Netanyahu. Trump's going, "Hey, after everything I did for you, move the embassy to Jerusalem. Nobody else kept that promise. I did. And this is how you thank me?" So, Trump does have a memory of an elephant when it comes to that kind of stuff. And so he doesn't trust Netanyahu. As far as attacking Iran, that gets back to that assumption we discussed. If they assume Iran is weakened, and then, if this happens, boy, I hope it doesn't happen, but let's go worst case, that the Biden administration backs Netanyahu. They launch an attack sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks against Iran. It's defeated, and then Iran turns around and just blasts the holy hell out of Israel. At that point, Israel needs a rescue. And the United States might militarily try to retaliate against Iran, at which point the U.S. is going to start taking some casualties that it's never taken. And it runs the risk of this escalating into a war with Russia. Well, at that point, Trump will go, "Wait a second, I thought you said this thing was in the bag." And man, U.S. intelligence keeps doing this. They did it. They did it with the cyber war that Israel ended up launching against Iran back in, was it 2014 or 2012?
Stuxnet, yeah?
Yeah, Stuxnet. And remember that, Obama was like upset that, hey, he told me that this is going to cripple them. Looks like all it's done is pissed them off, So that's it is somewhat reassuring that despite assembling this pro-Zionist crowd of potential nominees around him, that Trump is still sort of his own man on this and apparently wants to call the shots. We'll see. I hope that's the case.
Here comes the new story in the United States about Iranian drones spying on the United States in New Jersey. Here's what.
Repeated drone sightings in the Northeast, especially in New Jersey. These are not small drones, some of them pretty large. They're flying at low altitudes, they're flying in flocks. Has the president been briefed on this situation?
So we are certainly aware, the president is aware. So we're closely tracking the activity and coordinating closely with relevant agency, including DHS and FBI, to continue to investigate these incidents. Don't have anything beyond that to share. Obviously, this is something that DHS and FBI are tracking very, very closely, and so I would have to refer you to them directly, but aware. Keeping an eye out and looking into the incidents that you just mentioned.
Couple still though, but has the federal government ruled out that these are controlled by foreign entities?
Yeah.
And do you know if they're conducting surveillance over these areas?
I cannot make any kind of predictions or comments about that specifically from here. This is something that DHS is looking at and FBI, so I would have to refer you to them. I don't have anything beyond that. We're tracking this very closely. Obviously, we're all aware of the incidents that have been reported. I'm not going to go into what they could be or could not be from here. That is something that obviously is being looked at as those respective agencies.
Larry, here is the reaction from Elon Musk. He says that it seems that everybody trying to say that Iran is behind this drones and they're spying on the United States. He's simply saying that they're trying to make a new conflict, a new war between the United States and Iran.
Yeah.
And he's not interested in that type of attitude.
I believe that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I said I believe that's probably one of the motivating elements of this. I can't rule out that the most likely explanation for these drones is that it's a Department of Defense contractor doing some testing of capabilities that were written into the contract. Can they perform this? But like they're spying on Jersey. The United States government's already spying on every damn American, okay? They've already got full access to people's cell phones and computer messages. Spying on us for what? In Jersey in particular? Have you been to New Jersey? Yeah, they've got, Newark isn't exactly a garden spot. They do have some wonderful wooded areas down south. If you watch The Sopranos, they take people out there into the pine barrens and bury them. That's where they dispose the bodies. So this is the fact that they're seizing on Iran, that Iran sailed a mothership to launch drones. For what? I mean, I always believe that actions are carried out purposefully. If they're not, then you probably have a mental illness or obsessive compulsive disorder if you just keep doing something over and over. So, ridiculous.
And here is Matt Miller, Larry, comparing Netanyahu to Bashar al-Assad.
Count Chocula.
Yesterday, that the Assad regime, or Assad himself, should be held accountable. Will you support his application to stand in front of the ICC as a war criminal who committed crimes against humanity?
So we support the work of the ICC. I know that obviously we have disagreed with their hold on. I'm gonna let me address it.
You support the work of the ICC until they do something about it.
So we have had a long. Let me just answer the question. You know what, Matt? Let me answer the question because I was addressing that before you interrupted me. We obviously have had a jurisdictional dispute with them as it relates to cases against Israel. That is a long-standing jurisdictional dispute. But that said, we have also made clear that we support broadly their work, and we have supported their work in other cases, despite our jurisdictional dispute when it comes to Israel.
Hey, I wonder what career he's going to have now once the Biden administration ends. Is he going to become a gymnast? He's certainly good at the backflip, doing those reverses. It's just, again, it underscores the one thing I learned during my brief tenure with the federal government. I say brief. I was there a grand total of 8 years, but I continued to work as a contractor. But particularly when you're at state, you learn early on that you've got to be aware of messaging. What kind of message are you trying to deliver? You don't want to send mixed signals. And this goes to the heart of formulating policy. What is our policy? Is our policy that we're going to uphold international law? Okay, that's our thing, and we're going to be known for international law. Then we can't open torture centers in Egypt and Thailand and Poland and Syria. We even did that. Bashar al-Assad cooperated even with the CIA at one point in going after these Sunni extremists because they were a threat to him too. And we tortured them there. And then we torture people at Guantanamo. Oh, maybe that Guantanamo's a bad idea. We shouldn't do that. That will hurt our messaging about international law. So what all of this exposes is that the United States is when it comes to superpowers, we're the super hypocrite. We take hypocrisy to nuclear levels.
Larry, how do you find the situation right now in Ukraine with the new aids going from the United States to Ukraine? And they're talking about the drafting age reducing from 25 to 18. Are they going to do this before Donald Trump taking office in the United States, or it's not going to happen?
It's not going to happen. Zelensky himself admitted the other day, hey, it's not going to happen. He'd be out on his ass in a heartbeat. The problem with Ukraine is the demographics. If you look at Have you ever seen, it looks like a figure eight. It comes out and then it comes in, then it goes back out. The demographics for Ukraine are such that where it comes down and gets narrow, that's the 18 to 24-year-old. So there's not a big pool of manpower there. And what Ukraine's run into is that 25 to 50 range. They've exhausted that. They finally, ABC News, I believe it was yesterday, admitted that at least 1 million dead Ukrainians. Whereas the media Zona for the Russian side estimates that they've had 82,000 dead, which is a lot. But basically, the casualty rate is for every Russian that dies, there are 10 Ukrainians dead. So Ukraine's situation is growing more desperate with each passing day. Russia just overnight completed a massive missile drone strike on the energy producing centers that provide electricity, provide heat. And so now they're in the dead of winter, and Russia is basically turning off all the lights in Ukraine. And so right now in Kiev, it's 7:30 p.m. It's dark, and they don't have electricity. They're trying to do that across the country. Lviv, Sumy. There are reports coming out that the Ukrainian authorities were evacuating, 40 settlements around Kharkov. No, so and just yesterday, the Russians completely enveloped a large Ukrainian force. So the war is going very, very badly for Ukraine. And okay, let's say that they did lower the age to 18, and they could suddenly get 50,000 new guys wearing a uniform. They're not trained. They're not going to be trained. And if you want them to be able to function efficiently and effectively on a battlefield, you're going to need at least 6 months. And that's just to be basically trained and have minimal competence and being able to operate a variety of weapon systems. Ukraine doesn't have that time. So they don't have the manpower, they don't have the time, and Russia's not backing down. Russia's intensifying the attacks. So at some point, Ukraine's going to break. It could happen this week. It could happen in 3 months. I don't know.
Larry, Anthony Blinken's family came from the region called Ukraine right now.
Yeah, around Kiev.
I don't understand his mindset right now. When you look at what he has done to Ukraine, and they destroyed Ukraine, they destroyed the Ukrainian population. The country has no future at this particular moment. And I don't understand how can they convince themselves, considering what they've done so far to Ukraine.
Oh man, he's happy to do it to Ukraine. He's getting payback for Grandpa, what they did to Grandpa. Think about that. These people that are dying in Ukraine, their ancestors were persecuting the Jews. So Blinken, happy to let them die. I mean, that's a cynical view I take. The United States, look, the history of the United States since the end of World War II, we've always liked to portray ourselves in terms of the Marshall Plan. Oh, we're kicking out food bundles to the hungry Germans, and we're giving candy to the kids. Aren't we nice? Then look at what we did in Vietnam, Central America, Africa, Iraq, Afghanistan. To this day, we have a lot of veterans who served the United States, and they carried out combat missions in places like Afghanistan, where they'd go into villages at night to root out a terrorist. How do we know they're terrorists? Well, they were moving weapons, and they're trying to kill American soldiers. Boy, I wish I had the money to make the movie, but it would be we would reverse it. It would be all of these, rednecks here in the United States, up in West Virginia and Kentucky, that live in the mountains. And there would be all these Syrian or Iraqi or Afghan special operations soldiers coming in to our villages. These foreigners that we're going to be fighting because they say we're terrorists. And we'd be fighting them and killing them. And yet they put us as the bad guys and portray themselves as the heroes. But that's the reality of what we were doing in Afghanistan. We were foreign invaders, and people were fighting to keep us out of their damn homes. And we didn't see that or understand it. So we've brutalized millions, killed and maimed millions. And we don't care because we don't taste that war here in the United States, okay? We don't have any enemy invading us, bombing us. That's really why what happened on the attacks on 9/11, and I know when I get into this, some people say, oh, it was an inside job. Oh, it was Israel that did it. Let's just deal with that was viewed for the majority of Americans as an attack on America, the first time they'd suffered those kinds of casualties. And since the attack in Pearl Harbor, and that wasn't really on continental United, that was on an island. But this was now the first major attack on U.S. soil. And we were outraged by it. Just imagine if we were enduring what the people of Lebanon had been enduring from Israel, or what the Gazans, the Palestinians, have endured in Gaza, or what they are suffering in the West Bank. So that's why I say, unfortunately, my country, the United States, is a danger to world peace. And that's what I think a growing number of countries are coming to realize. And they're not going to acquiesce to it anymore. They're going to push back.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Sure, I cheered you up, right? So, on that good note of good news, let's say goodbye. All right, my friend. You have a good weekend.
You have a good. You too.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.